Peter, for joining me on Facebook Live. So just to give folks a little bit of context, can you tell us a little bit about your experience and, I mean, what you do for work now, which is obviously medicine?
Yeah. So I'm a medical doctor and the medical director for SeeChange. So I worked for quite a few years with a medical humanitarian organization. I'm currently based in Southern Ontario and working at a community health center. So seeing some people who are sick with the virus and others who are interested in getting vaccinated against the virus.
Okay, great. So the purpose for today's session is to answer some of the frequently asked questions that we've seen online and also address some of the concerns that seem to be going viral with some of the headlines and lack of scientific information. So just to start off with the basics, what are vaccines and how do they work?
So vaccines are products that are meant to stimulate a person's immune system. So it's important to make that distinction between vaccination and immunization. The vaccine is the product. By getting a vaccine, which is usually an injection, sometimes oral, it is meant to stimulate a person's immune system to protect that person against that infectious disease if they're ever exposed to that germ in the future.
Okay. And we've seen a few different COVID-19 vaccines be approved by Health Canada. What is that process like? How do we know that they're safe?
So all of the vaccines have had to go through rigorous clinical trials. So these trials look at the two main factors are safety and efficacy. So you might have heard of phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 trials. So they start by looking at safety, so that's phase 1, and then they move on to look more at benefit or how well they work in a controlled setting. So it's important to note that the vaccines are okayed for emergency use here in Canada, and that one other way to look at this safety issue is to monitor continuously over time for side effects. So that's what's taking place now. If it's felt that there's a question about safety, then a pause could be taken. So we've seen that in the US with the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. So the use of that vaccine was paused while scientists and the government looked at the data. So
Okay, so even though we're seeing the approval happen a bit quicker in this case because of the pandemic as an emergency, we're confident that there's no shortcuts to get around any of the safety requirements.
Yeah. So things did happen quite quickly, but yeah, I would agree that there were no shortcuts in that process. I mean, even the newer vaccines have have been developed over a number of years. So yeah, so this issue of safety is one that's has been looked at and continues to be looked at. So
okay. And with the COVID-19 vaccine, why is it that we need to have 2 doses as opposed to just 1?
So yeah, the vaccines currently available in Canada had a second dose as part of the studies. That second dose was meant to provoke a stronger immune response compared to just 1 dose. Having said that, there is some good data that just the first dose of a vaccine is highly effective. I've seen a recent study from Scotland that shows that 4 to 5 weeks after the first dose of AstraZeneca vaccine, the risk of that person being admitted to hospital with severe COVID-19 disease was reduced by 94%.
Okay. And seeing that first dose is so effective, I think there's some hesitancy about getting the second dose. Maybe some people are feeling that it might not be that necessary. But what is the consequence of skipping your second dose?
So missing that second dose will lead to a shorter duration of protection. So that figure that I quoted, I mean, that reduction of 94% won't last forever. Over time, that degree of protection will wane. So missing a second dose means you'll have a shorter duration of protection. What we want to have is, a significant duration of protection so that, you know, later in the year, if we're exposed to the virus, then we're still protected.
Okay. And another question about the second dose. If I get Pfizer first, can I just take any of the vaccines as my second dose, whatever's available to me, or do I need to have the same brand for both doses?
Yeah, for now, a person should be staying with the same brand for the second dose that they received for the first dose. I mean, it might be at some point in the future that some studies show that mixing different brands might have a particular benefit, but for now, we don't have that data, so stick with the same brand for the second dose.
Okay, that makes sense. And if someone's already had COVID, I mean, usually we think about catching something and then we're immune to it afterwards. So should people who have had COVID already still consider taking the vaccine?
So yeah, so that's a good question. So there's a number of different factors to consider, including this one that I mentioned, duration of protection. So if you've had COVID, you do have a degree of protection for a certain amount of time. So a person has to look at the likelihood that they'll be exposed to the virus in the future and whether that virus might be a different variant. So what I would suggest is talking to your healthcare professional if you've already had COVID-19, so the actual virus. Talk with your healthcare professional about the need for a vaccine and the timing of that vaccine.
Okay. And for those who are signing up for their first dose, what are some of the common side effects that they can expect at the time of injection and maybe a couple of days later?
Yeah, so common side effects, so expected side effects would be a sore arm. Most people feel a little bit tired. Some people get a headache, nausea. A few people get fever and chills. Allergic reactions are much less common. So there is a risk of allergic reactions, but it's quite rare and quite treatable as well too. So I've already got the first dose of my vaccine. So I had a sore arm for less than a day. A few days later, so days 4 through 6, I had some nausea. So yeah, other than that, I felt fine. So.
Okay. And I think the big side effect or big concern that has been circulating in media and on social media is about blood clots, which sounds very serious and very scary when you see that on a headline. What are the chances of someone getting a blood clot from the vaccine?
So yeah, so this issue of blood clots are a real risk, but fortunately rare. So we should mention that the type of blood clot we're talking about is more complicated than the usual blood clot that people know, which would involve, for example, a blood clot in the leg after a prolonged period of travel or rest. So the ones we're talking about are a blood clot of a vessel in behind the eyes called the cerebral sinus vein. So you might see the acronym CSVT, that's cerebral sinus vein thrombosis. Another one is related to veins around the liver. So we call that portal vein thrombosis. So these are serious blood clots. The risk is, well, it varies depending on a person's age, but it's about 1 in 500,000. So it is important to compare that risk to the risk of getting a blood clot if you get severe COVID-19 disease. So the data shows that people who end up in hospital with the actual virus, so and causing severe COVID-19 disease, their risk of getting a blood clot is about 1 in 5, and even higher if they end up in the ICU. So we do need to compare these relative risks, 1 in 5 or 20% if you get the actual virus and end up with a severe case, versus 1 in 500,000 with a vaccine.
Okay. Okay. And that sounds to be, along with any medical treatment or procedure, that there are some risks, but that one needs to really weigh the benefits of it before kind of allowing the risks or side effects to determine whether or not to move forward.
Yeah, everything has a potential risk. If I take Tylenol or aspirin, then there's a potential risk to me taking that. So I need to compare these, the relative risk of getting a vaccine versus, in this case, my risk of getting severe COVID-19 disease.
Okay. And can someone get COVID-19 disease from the vaccine?
So the answer is definitely not. So the COVID vaccines do not contain any live virus at all. So there's no chance that they would give you actual COVID-19 disease.
Okay. And after getting vaccinated, first dose, second dose, I believe that there's like a 2-week waiting period after the second dose for the immunity to kind of be set. Do we still need to wear a mask and social distance after the vaccination?
So the answer is yes for now. So although vaccines are especially good at preventing severe COVID-19 disease, it is still possible to get a mild to moderate case. So it is possible to carry the virus, to spread it to others in some cases. So for now, it is important to continue wearing a mask and distancing as well.
Okay. And we have a question here from Jessica. She asks if we could talk about the risks between the different kinds of vaccines, like different kinds of COVID vaccines.
Yeah. So in Canada now, there's 3 vaccines available. So Pfizer, Moderna, and AstraZeneca. So all of these vaccines do carry a risk of blood clots. I've seen different statistics, but AstraZeneca a bit more for the cerebral sinus vein. Whereas I've seen a statistic where the Pfizer actually has a higher risk of causing these liver vein thromboses. So, and they all carry a small but real risk. So, yeah, no vaccine is safe, no medication is safe. There's not much, 100% safe. There's really not much that we do in our everyday lives that carry a degree of, 100% safety either. So we have to weigh these relative risks.
Okay, but in general, the risks between the different brands is similar to one another, and people shouldn't need to feel like they have to avoid a certain brand over another.
Yeah, so where I am now in Ontario, there's a community spread of the virus, so people need to weigh the risk of getting the actual virus, and again, the risk of getting severe disease, COVID-19 disease, that might put them in hospitals. So it depends a bit on where you live. It depends on your age. If you have underlying conditions, if there's, other, people at risk in your life, specifically elderly people, yeah. So you have to weigh all of these different factors and come up with a decision that's right for you.
Okay. And Rachel asked, she mentions that 400,000 people have received the AstraZeneca vaccine in Montreal. One 54-year-old has sadly passed away from a rare blood clot. Could you remind us why we still need to take the AstraZeneca vaccine? What does that, I guess, tragic loss in the context of the costs and benefits from the vaccine?
Yeah, so that's an unfortunate case, but again, yeah, that shows us that nothing is 100% safe. So when we think of all the other people who've gotten the vaccine, who have developed a degree of protection, they've achieved a certain amount of benefit, not just for themselves, but their families and the wider community, because we're helping to stop this community spread. So yeah, it's unfortunate, very unfortunate for this woman and her family. But this pandemic is not going to be over until a large proportion of the population has developed some degree of immunity. That can happen either from getting a vaccine, it can happen from getting the actual virus itself. So yeah, we need to.
And like you mentioned, that the risk of the blood clots from severe COVID-19 disease is astronomically greater than the risk from the vaccine itself.
Yeah, so yeah, the virus itself can cause a number of serious issues. One is blood clots, another, of course, is the lung disease that people get that cause the shortness of breath. And the virus does a lot of serious things to our body. Clots is one of them. So, anything we can do to prevent getting severe COVID-19 disease, is important.
Right. And kind of, from that, why are vaccines and why is the COVID-19 vaccine important to stopping the pandemic?
Yeah, so we're in the middle of a serious pandemic, especially in some parts of Canada. Again, we need to achieve, well, you might have heard the term herd immunity, but it is an element of immunity in a large proportion of the population is what we want to get. And personally, I'd prefer to go with the vaccine over getting the actual virus itself. So, until a lot of people have that element of immunity, that's, we're going to continue to end up with these successive waves. So we do want to prevent having, waves, ongoing waves. So yeah, talk with your healthcare professional about, how best to achieve some element of immunity.
Okay. And in the meantime, as eligibility starts changing and the vaccine is rolled out to more and more people in Canada, can you remind us of like the key points of how to protect ourselves from COVID-19?
Yeah, so if you're sick in any way, then stay home until you're feeling better. If you're going out into a public place, especially indoors, then wear a mask. It's an easy thing to do, to slap on a mask. You're protecting other people, including the elderly, by doing that, and people at risk, and then distancing as well too. So that's those are all important issues. If everybody did that for a significant amount of time, then the community spread would be much less, and we would find ourselves, a way out of this pandemic.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you so much, Peter. I think those were all the questions for today. Just a note to anyone who is watching this after it's live and watching the recording, you can leave a comment with other questions and we can do another session in the future. Thanks, Peter, for sharing your insight. And I hope this provides some good information for everyone to make a well-informed decision for themselves.
Okay. Thank you, Tanya. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks. Bye-bye.